Okay. Welcome, fellow Druids, again to Full Circle. Today what I want to talk about is a little bit more of a tactical discussion, and that is going to be on when to feat. I would say if you look across the game, on average, and you played a bunch of Watch Machine, you're going to see a lot of people who just feat somewhere between the bottom of turn 1 to the top of turn 3. I would say most feats happen in there. And I'm not necessarily saying that's bad. I think you would normally see a lot of that happening. But that's not always going to be your best time to feat, and it really is going to depend on the type of feat you have and what benefit you need out of your feat. And to that end, what I want to look at is a lot of feats have multiple things that they actually do. To give some examples, so Grail has a feat that gives stealth and some movement to his army. Chromac has a feat that gives out a hit buff, well, helps him cast his hit buff, a damage buff, and an armor buff. You've got Balder 1, who gives a sort of a control buff to where they can go, but is also a buff to surviving from ranged attacks. Things like that. So there's a lot of feats that are like that are variable. Kruger 2 pushes you away, but also suffers a speed penalty. So when you're playing against an opponent, it shouldn't just be like, well, I need, I'm going to go up, I'm going to run turn 1, and then turn 2, I'm going to feat, and then turn 3, I'm going to smash into them, right? Might work a lot of times. There's certainly some casters that's going to work well with. My aforementioned Balder 2, for example, right, is a great, or I'm sorry, Balder 1 is a great example of, I'm going to try to put him in a position, so let's say we go first. I want to put him in a position where he's as far up the table as he can be, toward the most relevant part of the scenario he can be, and on the top of 2, I want to feat so that I can put my army in a place to keep them from being able to retaliate, so that I can deliver an alpha strike. However, with that same caster, you may want to consider that this is sort of going to depend on the army. If you know for a fact that your opponent is faster than you, the chances of you getting the alpha strike in the first place are rather low, right? And in that case, your best bet probably is to do what I just described. You want to try to use the feat to sort of change the fact that your opponent would normally get the alpha strike into you getting the alpha strike, and I think that's going to be a good way to use your feat. However, if you're already faster than your opponent, you don't need, and let's say they don't have a lot of guns, you don't need to use that feat to deliver the alpha. What you may want to consider, and it depends on how things play out, is now using that feat to prevent them from being able to have a scenario, any sort of engagement with the scenario, right? So now imagine on turn 1 you ran, on turn 2 you're able to get your alpha strike that I mentioned, or they stay back, right? So well, let's say first you get the alpha strike. So now you've got all of your infantry or beasts or whatever you brought to the table up in their face, and they have to deal with all that. You didn't feat though, right? And like I said, they don't have guns, because we'll talk about that in a second. And now they have to deal with your army, and then the next turn you feat, and by doing so you can now you can keep them from being able to get into the scenario or get very far into the scenario, and that's going to give you a big advantage in the game. So that's one way that you could approach that. Now let's look at another example. Let's say you're playing in a legion, right? They have a lot of flying pieces, they have a lot of shooting, and now the thing you're going to want to do is use that feat actually to give your army cover, which is something that most of their shooting does not ignore. Again, that's the right benefit at the right time, and you really need to look at, and this is true for many casters, you should really be looking at what part of my feat is the most important, or what is the most important application of my feat, right? I had a game recently where I played Chromac 2 into Haley 3, which on paper is probably a pretty bad matchup for Chromac 2 because I'm out-threatened everywhere. His infantry, he's got trench and long gunners that are threat 20 inches. He has trencher infantry that threat 16 inches. He has grenadiers and chargers that all out threaten my basically only melee army, and you know, and he's got clouds and things like that. So what is but of all those things, do any of those things hit, or sorry, do any of those things have very high armor values? No. Trench busters are like arm 18 with 8 wounds. Jacks are like arm 15. The caster herself is a little bit harder to kill, but none of that has an armor value that is of concern, right? So what's the best use of my feat there? The best use of my feat there is the +2 armor part of the feat, and it played out correctly. I literally ran my whole army into his army. I feated. I put Chromac in the safest place that I could when I did so, and said, and he camped like 5 and cast Spiny Growth, and I said, okay, here's my army. Deal with it. And he's, you know, that list is sort of equipped to be able to pick off a few things, pick things off from distance, pick off a lot of models. It's not designed to kill, what would that list have? Four Warp Wolves, some Light War Beasts, and Chromac. Like, it doesn't have the stuff to kill all of that. It can maybe kill 1 or 2 of those beasts, but then I'm in his army. He's out of the zone. He spent a lot more time on clock than I have, because I've basically just run at him. Right? That's the right play for that. Now flip that around. Let's say we're talking about you're dropping into Trollbloods, right? They generally do have a lot of armor. They generally have, depends on the list, but they have, you know, they can build a lot of times. Their beasts can hit really hard, and their infantry can hit very hard. So the armor part of the feat is going to be good, but probably not something you're overly going to rely on as your only means of saving yourself. What you want there, and what you should be able to hopefully deliver for yourself there, is the Alpha Strike. And in order to get the right benefit out of doing that, you need to be able to use the armor cracking part of the feat. Or if you're going, you know, let's say it's more like you're dropping Chromac 2 into like a Khador brick, or you know, Khador Warjack brick. You need that. You need to be able to have things like the Feral and the Stalker and Getorix all get +2. You know, get that +2 to each of their damage rolls. You know, and possibly even primal in some cases, in order to kill enough stuff that you can be safe from retaliation. And the +2 armor is going to help with the retaliation, but really you needed to kill enough stuff to make sure that you're okay. So in that case, you don't want to feat before you're going to get into his army. Against someone like I said, against someone like Signar, you want to use a feat like that to keep yourself safer. With somebody like Kruger 2, a lot of times you're looking, again, like I said, in that turn 1, 2, 3 time frame to feat, because you want to gain, you want to keep your army safe. You want to push them back. It's hopefully going to prevent charges from being able to happen, and so forth. But other uses of it are, you should possibly hold it until you can use it to guarantee that you're going to get 1 or 2 control points. You could hold it, if you have a more shooting focused list, you may want to hold it until after they've put guys into you, so you can push them out and then shoot again, because you can get the aiming bonus and things like that. You know, and sometimes you want to use it to just keep yourself safe. Other times you may even find weird scenarios where you want to use it for an assassination, because you can push their caster off of a wall or something. There are a lot of different applications of how to use Kruger's feat. So don't, you know, look at each game uniquely is sort of the takeaway here, is to look at each game uniquely and see what the best way is to use your feat. And you should probably be thinking about this as the game starts. Some casters, there's only you know, there's only really one way you use the feat, right? So with Baldur 2, you're using it to blunt their alpha, you're using it to keep stuff safe. You may still wait to use it until there's a turn you need to, but it's only really going to be used in one way. It's to give yourself an armor, you know, the armor and the no knockdown and stuff. Morvana 2 has a feat that's pretty straightforward. With hers, you're going to want to be careful not to wait too long to use it, because sorry, to maybe you will wait long. You want to time it correctly because you want to get the most attrition value, like get ahead on attrition by using your feet to like unattrit yourself to, but like you don't want to go so far that you've like lost all of your entire units and you can't do anything. So you've got to like balance that, but like you're not going to use it in a different way too often. Sometimes feats you have to realize you're not going to get a huge amount back for, and that's okay. Like Morvana 1's feat, if you only use it to RFP the 3 like unit leaders of the Ghost Fleet army, it's probably completely worth it as a feat. Just to throw that out there as an example. So there's stuff like that. Also keep in mind that there are feats like that that you shouldn't try to like maximize value. Chromac 1 is a prime example of that. His feat, a lot of people, especially the first time you look at Chromac, they're like, oh man, I'm going to feat and I'm going to be able to make like, what is it, 7, he's got 2 initials, 7 Fury, so that's 9, and then the 7 is 16. I'm going to make 16 attacks against their caster as Chromac, and it's going to be awesome. So I got to hold my feet to do that. And I can tell you, and I haven't played a lot of Chromac 1 in Mark 2. It's been a little while even into Mark... Sorry, I haven't played that much in Mark 3. Even back in Mark 2, it had been a little while. But I can tell you that sitting on his feet to do that, there are games that it's probably fine. But a lot of games, that is not what you want to do with that feat. A lot of games, what you actually want to do... So let's say you're playing into Crix. The best thing that you probably want to do with that feat is use it so that you can feat on your first turn to get all of your upkeeps out and have him cast Bestial so that your army is safe from arcing things like Crippling Grasp. That is the best use, bar none, for that particular feat against that particular army. Against somebody with offensive upkeeps that has fast arc nodes. So Crix and there's Fieldage, but yeah, against something like that, you absolutely, the best use of his feat is to do that. Against somebody with this was a finding that you can, if you go way back, and probably can't even find the article anymore, but there used to be this long thread on Chromac in the Mark II forums where Will Pagani talks about the fact that in he felt like early on in Mark II that Iron Flesh Kayazi just wrecked the list. And then he thought more about the list, and he thought more about what was in it, and the Gallows Groves had just kind of dropped right around then. And what he realized was he has Rift. And it's Blast's POW 7, which means you're killing Kayazi on, I think, 5s. And he would just feat, or at least if I'm understanding it correctly, he would feat and throw out 3 Rifts at the Kayazis, and who cares if their defense 18 or not? You just drift Rifts on top. They're AoE 4, so it's hard to deviate. Like, try to put them in the best place you can. And now the best use of his feat was to clear things out that he didn't have another solution to. So it's and it's things like that that you want to be looking for. And just sort of as a final note on this, also try really hard not to just be looking for the perfect feat. It's not really going to happen a lot. Kaya 2 feat, with Kaya 2, you're like, I'm going to put my whole army into them, and then I'm going to feat and bring it back to safety, and it's going to be awesome. It's often not going to work out like that. If you can use her feat to get 1 or 2 things, or like half a grid of a Colossal or something like that for free, it might be worth doing, especially if you know they're going to be into you the next turn if you don't, or anything like that. Like, you may just want to use it for something like that. Again, it's all going to be caster to caster, right? And some of them, it's more obvious. Like, if you look at Kruger 1's feat, like, I'm only going to get so much infantry with this, and the sooner I do it, the more those lightning things are on the table, and the more relevant they are. So you need to sort of find where you can safely position yourself to kill the most relevant things that would be otherwise hard to kill with it, and then not overthink it. And sometimes you don't want part of a feat too. So Bradigus is a great example. He pushes forward, well, you can push in any direction. Usually you're going to go forward 5 inches. and then you go back up to 5 inches. But sometimes the correct play is going to be going back 0, because you don't actually want your hard to kill things leaving their zone. So consider things like that. So anyways, to wrap us up here, you want to really look at why you're feeding, look at what you need out of your feat, look at what you need in order to win the game, and feat accordingly. Don't just go, well, I have to feat now because, you know, and just experiment a little bit while you're playing and see if you're like, well, what if I feat on the bottom of 1? How does that change things? What if I hold my feat until turn 3? How does that change things? You know, and see what you can do. So again, thanks for watching.